Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm joined. There's a real Friday feeling about tonight's game because I'm joined by Laura Bradburn and Alan Morrison. Welcome to the show, guys. We're here to talk about the Ross County game. We are obviously in collaboration now on match day with our friends at Celtic Down Under. They came on, they told us all about Ange, they told us not to worry, everything would be fine. And they were right. And now we collaborate with them. Even when it's 4 o'clock in the morning and they're all sleeping, we will be streaming live on their Twitter page and live on Acsom's YouTube page. I'm guessing you've both had a chance to have a look at the starting lineup. And a lot of the chat this week was about how do we treat this game? How do we treat this tournament actually at this stage? Do we rest players? Well, Ange has responded with this lineup. Alan Morrison, I'll come to you first for your general view on the team line. Still a strong team to pick, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, just first and foremost, an overriding feeling is just excitement at being able to see the team play again. I mean, and that's just such a that's a lovely thing to say and a feeling to have. And even last season, if we'd made that many changes, there would have been genuine trepidation. And I think, the manager did a piece in midweek with, I think it was the Open Goal podcast, and he talked about that in his mind, he probably had about 13, 14 players that he could trust for a lot of the season to play until we got to the January and got those 4 players in, especially, and it started to settle down. And then he didn't really fiddle or tinker with the lineup much after that. And so, to feel that he can make this volume of changes, although poor old Callum McGregor still doesn't get a rest, is great to think that he's got this number of players that he feels he can trust to win an important game, and it is an important game. We're defending a trophy here. This isn't a secondary concern. I don't think the number of changes is reflective of any disrespect to either the competition or to the opposition. Ross County, I think it's genuinely that he feels that the team have been training really hard. They've had full weeks training. In fact, again, in that interview, which I'd strongly recommend people look at, he even alluded to the fact that he felt that the players they'd almost been training so hard that they were perhaps not at their best on match day. Right. And it's all geared towards being in peak condition for the Champions League matches. So I found that very interesting. So this is all about, especially in those Champions League games and big game, 2 games a week now, all these players are going to have to be ready for action because no one's going to play, 60 games. There's people are going to play 30, 40 games. Even some of the ones tonight will potentially start 20, 25, 30 games easily. Yeah. So it's to me, it's sensible. It isn't disrespectful, and it's really exciting because, he trusts these players and he thinks they'll do the job tonight.
Yeah, that is a very interesting point in that you've got to be at that kind of level to step in. I think the case in point is Stephen Welsh. We've not seen him since the first day of the season. We know there's been some illness in about that as well. He's not on the bench against Dundee United. He comes straight in and gets a start. We'll run through the team, Laura, but generally when you seen that coming out, what was your thoughts?
Pretty much what I expected based on, like you say, the conversations that have been going around. Obviously, the thoughts amongst the coaching staff is very much the same as what the thoughts are amongst the fan base, which is again a refreshing change to see. I think the thing that struck me though was it's easy to say we've got a strong squad and it's easy to think we've got a strong squad, but it's only when you see the calibre of lineup we can put out tonight that's supposedly second string that, I would potentially be happy to see, play most of the top sides in Scotland. There's a lot of significant changes there. The biggest one for me being obviously Joe Hart not being in goal and it being Siegrist instead. But having said that, I always thought he was a perfectly competent goalkeeper anytime I saw him playing for Dundee United, so I'm not concerned there. And as for the rest of the squad, well, basically, I wouldn't bat an eye at any of those being in the starting lineup any given week. So actually, although it might be a weaker squad or a second string team, I'm certainly not concerned that it's not got the strength to do what we need to do tonight.
I think the credit that Ange has been getting in relation to his recruitment is well deserved, but you've just got to look at the fact that I think we've probably shelled out about 12 or 13 what you would class as first team players not those on the periphery that's maybe made a substitute appearance, etc. But 12 or 13 players who were in the first team squad, and we've moved them on either permanently or temporarily on loan deals. Yet we can still field a team, like you say, Laura, that's got a very much a string element to it, and it's still pretty strong. I mean, you can still go into a game like tonight, which is a very tricky fixture often for Celtic, still with the confidence that you've got a strong enough team on the park. And we will run through that team. I'll bring it up on the screen. I know people complain about this because they want to see the faces of Alan Morrison and Laura Bradburn rather than looking at the team. But let's bring it up. Let's bring it up here. And we'll have a wee look at how we've lined up for anyone who hasn't checked us out online. We have Siegrist, interestingly, starting his first game for Celtic. Almost came on after poor Joe Hart got a wee knock to the head at the weekend. But unsurprisingly, he comes in to make his first start for Celtic since he's moved from Dundee United. We've got Tony Ralston back in at right back. This is his first start of the season. Bernabe, first start of the season at left back. Stephen Welsh, he's been out since the opening day against Aberdeen where he scored. Maurice Jens is back in after missing the 9-0 drubbing of Dundee United. In the midfield, as Alan says, McGregor doesn't get a rest. He's heading towards 400 appearances. It's 383 tonight. We've got Aaron Mooy, first start for Celtic. Looking forward to seeing his performance. I thought when he came on at the weekend, and Alan can elaborate on this, he performed particularly well. David Turnbull, he's been involved in every game, albeit not everyone has been a starting game for Turnbull, but he starts tonight. Abada, following his hat-trick, starts alongside Maeda, who is back in on the left, and Giakoumakis also getting his first start of the season. On the bench, we've got Bain, Starfelt, Kyogo, Haksabanovic, who might make his debut, McCarthy, Jota, Hatate, Forrest and Juranovic. We've said this a few times, what a strong bench. But in terms of what I was saying there about Aaron Mooy, I'm looking forward to seeing him tonight, Alan, but I did notice some of your stats were being tweeted out, really just showing how powerful a performance he had against Dundee United.
Yeah, and listen, as I always say repeatedly and make no apology for it, context is always important. So if you're coming on at 6-0 or whatever it was, 7-0 at the time that you came onto the pitch, there's not a lot of jeopardy in the game, and you can pretty much just kind of relax into it clearly against a very demoralised opposition. So that has to be taken into account. But having said all that, he did show, I would say, an improved range of passing. I think in his very brief appearances so far, he's looked very safe, very conservative almost, really just easing himself into the game, looking like he's just really feeling his way. We saw a little bit more. We saw a couple of, the pass for Maeda that set up Abada's hat-trick goal was an exceptional pass. What enthused me was that when he came on as well, that Dundee United were really in damage limitation mode. They went back to a sort of 4-5-1. They dropped a bit deeper, and there was less space than there had been in any part of the game in those closing minutes. But he still found about 14 line-breaking passes in the brief time that he was on the pitch, completed 50 passes in like 28 minutes. Four of his passes were then passed to someone to create a shot. So they were creative passes as well. So he just looks like it's very easy for him at this level. And I know it's not a great example. If he came on with 20 minutes to go away to Hibs or a goal down, it would be very different. And you'd have to play at a higher tempo. There'd be more risk involved, etc., and you have to take that into consideration. But he does, on the face of it, look like someone who's playing well within himself, and there's an awful lot more to come. So quite excited about that. The other thing that I felt about him, and again, I don't have a lot of evidence for it, was just a feeling really, was that because he's not the most athletic, he's not the quickest, he's not the biggest, most physical player, but he does seem to have a bit of intelligence about him in terms of the positions that he takes up. With his use of his body, the way he just blocks people off, he's quite clever. And so I think, again, what I'll be looking for is in the sort of hectic opening moments of this game, and I'm sure Ross County will try and, get forward as well. What's he like in that transition? What's he like in filling the space in front of the back four, etc. I'll be really be looking out for that to see how he copes with that. Now, Ross County themselves have made a number of changes tonight as well. So they've not got, I would say, their Saturday team out either. So
No.
I'm interested to see how that goes. But similarly, they should be fresh and looking to make an impression. They've had a tough start to the season with their fixtures. But yeah, listen, it's Ross County. It's always difficult there. It's a tight wee pitch. And so Mooy, how does he play under a bit more pressure? That'll be the thing I'll be looking for tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as Alan was saying there, Laura, it is all about context. Of course it is. We've gone up to Ross County, a completely different looking side that we had on the day, and we eventually got the win. And I think one of the important parts of that particular game was Maurice Jens, his performance. I've been very impressed with Jens. But I guess one of the dilemmas, and may well be a few after tonight's game, but one of the big dilemmas may well be the central defensive partnership, Laura, whereby we came to grow in confidence with Starfelt and Carter Vickers last season. But this season we've seen a combination of those two, but also Carter Vickers lining up alongside Stephen Welsh and Maurice Jens. And tonight we've got a new partnership of Jens and Welsh. Do you think one of the central defensive jerseys is still up for grabs? I know that there might be kind of default answers by Ange that every jersey is up for grabs, etc. But this is certainly one of those positions, isn't it? That Starfelt comes back in against Dundee United, scores a goal, plays well. Yet we still have Welsh in the sidelines. I'm not sure he'll start. But Jens has definitely got a shout for the game against Rangers, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I'm not hosting tonight because it means I don't have to look at the comments, so I can be completely as honest as I want to be. I've never come out of a game where we won 9-0 still being concerned about any player in the team, but I was concerned about Carl Starfelt because I just think that he just looks so unsure of himself and so panicked with the ball. He's poor passing on a couple of occasions nearly gave Dundee United some chances early on in the game. And I think Maurice Jens, as little as we've seen of him, just seemed so much more stable of an influence along with Cameron Carter-Vickers. And I know that on the ball ability isn't necessarily what you look for in a defender first and foremost. But when you're talking about a team who has so much possession and who depends on every player in that team to use possession to the best of their ability, especially domestically, you've got to factor that in when you evaluate a player. And I just don't think Carl Starfelt's got that for me. I think Jens has got a confidence about him that doesn't go so far as being arrogance, that I think he just seems comfortable with what he's being asked to do by Ange in terms of his distribution, in terms of the amount of the ball that he sees. Because to be absolutely honest, you see it with a number of defenders who are decent enough defenders that they, depending on the team that they play for, they can either look like, captain, leader, legend, whatever you want to call it, or they can look like Bambi on ice. And I think, unfortunately for Carl Starfelt, he might fare better in a team where he's got less of the ball to deal with at his feet, because I genuinely think that that's a weakness of his. I actually think he's weak defensively as well, but I mean that's for another discussion for another day. So in summary, the shirt is up for grabs, and I would personally put Welsh or Jens ahead of Starfelt in terms of somebody who I think is going to claim it.
You're still allowed to look at the comments, Laura, just because you're not presenting the show. You can still have a wee look through them. What I'm going to say about this is some things that Alan Morrison, that you've said before, Alan, that really resonate with me is that there are moments in games that you remember as an observer of football, which I am. I don't, if I come away from a game and you ask me who's played well, it's moments that you remember. And I think after the Dundee United game, we did mention, although we weren't critical of Carl Starfelt, but we did mention the fact that there was one slack pass. Juranovic, bit of a hospital ball. I think it was Middleton he had a decent shot at goal as a result of that. But I wasn't critical of his performance because I thought that he did pretty well against Stephen Fletcher. And I think Fletcher, in a very poor Dundee United side, played particularly well under the circumstances. If you're going into this game at the weekend, and I'm not getting ahead of myself, I know we're focusing on Ross County, but we're chatting about it, Alan, based on your kind of more analytical observations of football, Who do you think are the top two in terms of the centre-half positions at the moment?
Yeah. So I think this is perhaps the one area that would concern me tonight. It feels that without Carter Vickers, it doesn't feel as safe. because he's just so incredibly consistent. And I think almost he's at the stage like he'd completely got overlooked for all of the personal awards last season, and he started this season in the same form, and everyone just takes it for granted. And you might find tonight that you might realize what you take for granted isn't there. I'm not trying to cause alarm. I don't honestly think we'll be under that much pressure. But he is such a steadying influence, and in fact, what impressed me most about, and I know you're asking about the other two, but I'll come to that. What impressed me most about Carter Vickers last season was that his own personal performances never suffered, despite playing with a player Starfelt who took a long time to settle into the Scottish game. Yeah. Now, often, as we saw the season before, when we saw a weak link in the defence with one player, then the whole structure crumbled. In Lennon's last season. So that was another reason why I took to Carter, because even when all around him wasn't necessarily secure, and 1 week it was Juranovic, 1 week it was Ralston, Starfelt was making a lot of personal mistakes, etc. And the left back spot, was a bit of rotation there. His personal performances never wavered. So this is a chance tonight to see if the other two can step up in that regard. Both have played really well. Welsh was excellent against Aberdeen. He was absolutely excellent. And Jens was very good in the two games that he played. So that's been a really interesting position. I mean, coming back to Starfelt, I've not really changed my opinion on him. I'd actually gone as far as to write him off by the end of end of December last year. And to his credit, what he did do is he didn't change. I don't think he's 26, 27 years old now. I don't think he's fundamentally going to change his game. But what he did do is he cut out the sort of personal errors. He had a very high error rate, really bad sort of individual errors in the first 6 months of his career, and he largely cut those out in the second, and it felt like the team were almost playing around his limitations a little bit. He was playing a lot safer on the ball. He wasn't trying to do anything too sort of difficult. I think there was a more settled nature to the team, and the whole team were more comfortable with what the manager was asking them to do. And so for all those reasons, it just felt a bit more secure and a bit safer. So I think he's improved, and I'll give him that. But there's certain things that won't change. And the things that won't change are, in Scotland, he's going to be coming up against big, lumping centre forwards, and that his lack of physicality in terms of his physique, his size, allied to the fact he's a very aggressive defender. He's a very front foot aggressive defender, which means he gets caught under the ball a lot. He anticipates things and then gets it wrong, etc. Means that aspect of his play isn't going to change. Now, funnily enough, I think against European opposition who don't have such an emphasis on long, high balls into that channel. And if you watch all Celtic's opposition, they bang the ball on top of Greg Taylor and on top of Starfelt. That's what they do. Mm-hmm. Virtually every team does that. I think in Europe, he's stronger as a ground-based defender than he is as an aerial defender. He might actually, and he's relatively kind of quick and he's aggressive into the tackle. He might actually do better in some of the European games, possibly. But his passing's not great. It's as I said to you before, the thing that I immediately developed a sort of cognitive bias against him was just his whole body positioning. He just looks awkward and clumsy when he's positioning himself to receive the ball, always on his right foot. And again, it means he loses milliseconds, and we are talking fractions of seconds here in terms of his positioning, just to deal with balls, and he won't get that in Europe. The people will be on him, pressing him really quickly. So for me, it's still not, a resolved position, and I think it's all up for grabs. I think it's too early for Jens. I don't have enough data, frankly. I like the fact that he looks quite two-footed. He seems to have a bit of pace about him. He's also got a mistake in him, I think, as well. he's a bit younger. He's still got a lot to learn. So, and I think Welsh is a pretty steady player. Actually, he's pretty consistent as well. But he suffers in the same way Starfelt does in terms of he's just not a big defender. So again, under the high ball. And tonight, Ross County have benched their sort of quicker, more skillful direct strikers that they've had. I think the lad Hewula, and then also Edwards and Origby, and they've gone back with big hulking Jason White. So it's going to be Jason White. Got Starfelt sent off the last time that they played against each other. He bullied him, smashed him in the face, roughed him up, won headers against him. Eventually got sent off. So that's one to watch again. Really, and would be a slight concern. So yeah, not convinced yet. I still think it's an area that Celtic could improve.
That's interesting. I mean, you mentioned a couple of times there about age of particular players. Only four players are aged 27 or older this evening. Giakoumakis, of course, McGregor at 29, Mooy at 31 and Siegrist at 30. It's quite a young side that's out there, which I think is a feature of many of the signings that Ange Postecoglou has made. Quite a young defence as well. But let's get some of the comments coming in. Richard Austin think this might be a bit closer. I'm pretty sure it will be. Than the 9-0 anyway. Ewan Boy Martin, good to see you back on the chat. Tonight could be a tough match, but much more important games to focus on. We should still be okay. I am confident. I think with all the comings and goings, and I think we will talk a wee bit about that as well, what we have less of are players who are not contributing. So when we make a raft of changes, 9 changes in a starting lineup, what you're getting is players who are vying for a jersey. They're not just on the edges of the squad, Laura. And I think one of the things today, I never commented on social media about it because I thought, I'll have a wee chat about it tonight, is that we have obviously lined up a deal for Albion Ajeti. So looking through the transfers, obviously I have been very impressed with those coming in. Hopefully we'll see another one tonight with Haksabanovic coming on to make his debut. But Albion Ajeti, he secured a loan deal to Sturm Graz, and there is a possibility that will turn into, there is an option to buy, it will turn into a permanent deal. I think within one transfer window, if you are able to offload Julien, Ajeti, Bolingoli, Soro and Barkas all in one window, Laura, you think to yourself, wow, what an incredible transfer window that is already before you start looking at the arrivals. How impressed have you been with that? There seems to be a real urgency for us just to, let's get the deadwood out, no disrespect to the players, but they're not contributing, let's move them on and let's freshen up the squad.
Yeah, I think it's as important a part of management and of squad management as bringing players in. Obviously, bringing players in is the more exciting part, because you're hopeful that they're going to come in and make an impact, and getting players out of the door is less exciting because you're presumably doing that, certainly in this case, because they haven't had the impact that you want them to have. Occasionally with it, I do feel a little bit disappointed. So, for example, Owen Moffat going to Blackpool, as much as I think it's a great move for him and he'll get opportunities, there is always a bit of you that's disappointed when a young player who's come through the Celtic system is kind of made that move permanent in a way that means they will not get their chance at Celtic. But as for Ajeti and some of the other ones you lined off there was, it just proves once again that the manager has judgment that I trust, because I can't complain about any of the players who've been sent out. They would not have been anywhere near the Celtic first team except in dire circumstances in most cases, and so getting rid of them frees up wages, hopefully brings in funds for us to strengthen the squad in another way, because as we can see from tonight, for example, Ange is fulfilling his promise to up the level of the entire squad, not just the first 11. We've been played games in the last few years. You can think of ones, Joey Dawson, other players of that ilk who have come in and who you kind of go, oh, I forgot we even had that player. I forgot that was somebody who was even still at the club. What you're seeing tonight, and what hopefully will be a feature going forward, is that we've got a squad of 20 odd players, all of whom will contribute significantly to whatever we go on and win this season. And if getting some players out of the door who aren't going to contribute to that helps us to improve the entire level of the squad, then I'm more than happy to see it happen.
I think it's a great point you make there, because you mentioned both Moffat and Dawson, and there were occasions last season, Laura, where we had to use them. Moffat was used at, I still call it Love Street, New St Mirren Park, or whatever they call it these days. I'm an old-fashioned git. And Joey Dawson, of course, came on Boxing Day, didn't he, when Kyogo pulled up. So you have seen an incredible turnaround in personnel. When you look, Alan, at some of the departures, some of the younger players that Laura was alluding to there, that you thought might have had a future at Celtic, Ewan Henderson, for example, Karamoko Dembele, and young Owen Moffat, who, they've got some first-team experience at Celtic. It's not worked out for them. There's been changes with the B team set up. Is Ange looking at that situation and thinking that perhaps he's pretty disappointed with the lack of, or the dearth of talent that is coming through, because it looks as though he's shaking it up right down to that level as well, isn't he?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the first signs of that, because obviously the management at the top of the academy structure has changed, with Tommy McIntyre leaving and McManus and O'Day taking more of a running of that. So I think that's only the first steps. I don't believe that Ange has spent a lot of time and focus on the B team or the academy, because last year when he joined, it was just an absolute catastrophe that he had to deal with, and somehow get a team on the pitch to start.
Don't use that word catastrophe. Evangel's in the room.
Okay. And then he sort of had one. He had a transfer window in January to start to get some of the players in that he wanted, and then he had a very slim squad of players that he trusted to sort of see out the season. This summer, his priority has been about building a squad of players that can play 60 games, and I think he's almost there with that. I think we're about a couple short, I would say, but we're almost there. So I think the next focus of his attention, let's call it phase 3, will be that the conveyor belt, if you want to call it that. But I think it's a tough ask. And this is a subject we could probably spend a lot of time talking about. But ultimately, for me, the whole setup in Scotland is just structurally wrong. There is no pathway for young players to go from the youth football into the Premier first team. There just isn't. The Lowland League is too low a level, and in any case, the players playing in there are capped at 18. So if you're 19, 20, 21, what do? You're either exceptional and you're in the first team squad, and that's kind of Abada and Welsh really have been the only two that you could say that of. On a regular basis, or you have to go out on loan, in which case, why are you buying these players to send them out on loan? Now, the loan can be successful. We've seen players go to especially leagues like English League 1 and 2 and even the Scottish Championship. Those 3 divisions are really physically tough. They're tough leagues full of gnarly old pros. You learn a lot in those leagues, so that's not a bad thing to do. But again, they come back, and then are they good enough for the first team? It's as I say, the whole structure's broken, and that's not Celtic's fault. That's Scottish football's fault. So it's a really tough ask, I think. Celtic can do better, absolutely. They can have the best academy facilities. They can have the best academy coaches. They can have the best sports science. They can have the best data, the best nutrition, the best physios. None of those things. To be world class in all those departments, none of those things are outside of the gift of a club the size of Celtic. We can't buy the best players in the world because they're too expensive. But why can't we have the best physio? How much does a physio cost, right? Why can't you have the best injury detection software? Why can't you have the best data analysts? They hardly pay them peanuts anyway. So a good one's not that much more expensive than a bad one. You might as well get a good one, right? So all these things they should be working to. And that will at least provide an environment. And if you got in an environment, you'll then start to attract, the better kids. Celtic should have the best young players in Scotland, without a shadow of a doubt. We're the biggest club with the best facilities, the most money. We should have the best young footballers in Scotland as a minimum, and then you sort of build from there. So 2 things: it's structurally broken, and Celtic can do better. But you need to fix the first one to really get traction from the investment in the second one.
Yeah, absolutely. There are things in Scottish football, and like you say, that are so frustrating for football fans. Refereeing being one of them, the system of youth development being another, and also just those running the game. they're not very good, are they? Strangelove the Doctor. Lots of changes in the Ross County side tonight too. Good point, absolutely.
Yep, absolutely.
Feed the Bear reckons 4-0 to the Hoops. 91. Come on, you boys in green, stick a fiver on it, Feed the Bear. Not that I'm saying you should gamble, obviously.
Absolutely.
But I am looking forward to tonight's game. I think that Ange Postecoglou was always going to tinker with the side tonight, but I'm looking forward to seeing the debuts of some of the players. Hopefully the one on the bench comes on, Haksabanovic. And there is murmurings that we might bring in another player before the transfer window smashes shut. I'll let everybody get onto the action. We'll be back at half-time. I've got to thank everybody for joining us. In the comments section, we will bring up more of your comments at half-time and at full-time. But all that's left for me to say is thank you once again, Laura and Alan, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.